Hey, what's up everyone? Hope everybody's doing pretty good. Today we're studying Daf Tzadi Vav together. Daf 96 of Masechta Shabbis. Let's do an overview before we begin. So we are finishing up the 10th parak of Masechta Shabbis and beginning the 11th parak of Masechta Shabbis, the parak of Hazorek. So the Daf starts off with sort of a very exciting and gripping continuation of yesterday's discussions of Tumas Klei Cheres. But then we wrap that up and get to the new Daf, and the new parak, and specifically on Tzadi Vav Amud Beis, there are some pretty significant things. The Daf Tzadi Vav has been quoted really from the beginning, from the earliest days of the Masechta, because as we know by now, a humongous chunk of Masechta Shabbos is dedicated to the Malach of hotzaa. And on Daf Tzadi Vav Amud Beis, we actually talk about what is the source of hotzaa, what is the source of hachnasa, what is the significance of an av versus a tolada. So of course these are things that we've already been seeing throughout the Masechta, but this is really the source from all those things. Each time when we discuss these things, we're always quoting the Gemara in Tzadi Vav Amud Beis, so we're actually going to learn that together today. And then at the end of, and then it moves on to the source for how do we know that you're chai for throwing something 4 amos, and then we talk about the Mokoshes aitsim at the very end. What parsha was Mokoshes aitsim? Maybe like Parshas Emor or something like that at the end, Darton. In any event, so all interesting stuff. Well, some of it at least is interesting. I consider it all interesting, but you guys can decide for yourselves what you find interesting. Tzadi Vav Amud Aleph, all the way at the top, first line of the page. Amar Rav Asi, says the very holy Rav Asi, Shonin, we learned in a brisa, right? Rashi says, on the second line of Rashi on the page, HaTanaim Shonin brisa, that the Tanaim taught in a brisa. Okay, what did they teach? Klei Cheres, when it comes to vessels made out of earthenware, Shi'uro B'chones Mashke. So its Shi'ur is B'chones Mashke. When you have a hole that is large enough that water can get into the kli if you submerge it. So meaning the smallest possible hole would be motzi mashke, right? If there's a small enough hole that water would drip out of it, that's the smallest amount. But then the next size up is if the hole is slightly large enough that if you submerge the kli in water will come into the kli through that hole. So that is really the minimum shear where we see that a kli cheres is really going to become a full kli cheres is going to become unusable. So for example, you have a pitcher. So if that pitcher gets a tiny little hole in it that is motzi mashke, that water will drip out of it, the kli is still a kli for all intents and purposes. There's nothing that this kli would be unusable for. The only time that little tiny puncture is significant is when it comes to a, what do we call that? A gistera, right? Remember what that is? That's a little shard that that broke off from a kli. So we say that this gistera is usable as like scrap shards, right? And therefore it becomes a kli. But if that gistera, that scrap shard, gets a little tiny hole, even though it's so small that only water will come out of it, but no water will be able to come in through that hole, well, at that point your scrap pottery is completely useless once it gets that little hole in it, right? Because the whole point why you're going to use this shard, this gistera, is to put under another kli. So for example, if I have a pitcher and that pitcher gets a tiny little hole in it, so now water will come out of it. So what do? You take a gistera, you take a little shard that you have preserved for this exact purpose, and you put it under the kli so that so it'll keep the water in, or whatever it is. But once this gistera that really has no purpose other than to like put under other little tiny leaks, once this gets its own little tiny leak, forget it, it's useless. But if you have a regular pitcher, a kli, and it gets a hole in it that's large enough that if you submerge it in water will get into the kli from that hole, well, at that point, this kli already can't be used for efer mechatas, right? It wouldn't be considered mayim chaim el keli, right? To mix the efer paraduma with spring water in a kli. Once it has a hole large enough that water can get into the kli, so at that point this kli is not usable, at least for efer paraduma. So really the minimum, right, the smallest size of a hole that will already be mivatel a kli in a certain context is once it's enough for water to get into it. So Amar of Asi, Shonin, we learn in a Brisa, Klei Cheres, when it comes to earthenware vessels, Shi'uro b'chones mashke. So the minimum size that can be mevatel a kli from a certain use is going to be if water can get into the kli from that hole. V'lo amu motzi mashke. What about the fact that we mentioned motzi mashke yesterday, that if it's a tiny little puncture, that water can leave the kli, can drip out from it. El inyan gistra bilvad. That is really only regarding shards, not full out kalim. My time, how come motzi mashke, this little tiny puncture, is relevant for shards? Because we don't say, bring another shard because this shard has a hole in it, and we'll put this new shard under this other shard. No, at this point, if this shard has a tiny hole in it and it's, water's going to drip out of it, just get rid of it. It's completely useless. But a regular kli that has a tiny little puncture that some water might come out of it, it's still going to be considered a kli for all intents and purposes. Amar Ula, plige ba trei amorae b'ma'arave. So we have a machlokas between two amoraim in Eretz Yisrael with regard to hechsher zra'im. Right? We said yesterday that if you have a plant that's in a pot, and that pot is completely closed. It's an otzitz she'eno nakuv. There's no holes in it. It's completely closed. So in that case, the plant will be considered separate from the ground, and if water gets on it, it will be moshe lekabel tuma. However, if it's an otzitz nakuv, if it's a planter, if it's a pot that has a hole in it, well then, at that point, it's considered connected to the ground, and it will not, if water gets on it, it will not be moshe lekabel tuma. The question is, how large does that hole have to be? So that's the machlekes here. So Amar Ula, plige ba tre amorai b'ma'arava, that two amoraim argue in Eretz Yisrael. Reb Yossi bar Avin, Reb Yossi bar Zavda. Chad Amar, one of them said kimotzi rimon, Chad Amar kishorish cotton. So one of them said that the hole has to be large enough that a pomegranate can fit through that hole. At that point, it will be considered, the plant in the pot will be considered connected to the ground, and if water gets on the plant, it will not be machshir the plant in the kabel tuma. The other manda amar is kishorish cotton, which is like what, did we say that? Yeah, I think that's what we said yesterday. Yeah, that according to Rava. That, and the other manda amar is that once the hole is large enough that that it's the size of a small little root, at that point, the plant in the pot will be considered connected to the ground, and it will no longer be mukhshir. If water gets on it, it will not be machshir the plant in the kabel tumah. Okay, very good. V'simanich. And how can you remember what their respective positions were? Of course, that famous line that we've already seen twice in Masechta Brachos, maybe even here in Shabbos as well. Let's see, does he quote anywhere in Shabbos? No, he doesn't quote it. But anyways, right? Whether somebody does a lot, whether somebody does a little, the main thing is that you have kavana to serve God. But he's borrowing this phrase here to remember, to help you remember the positions on this subject, which are, one position is the size of a small root. The other position is the size of a pomegranate. The size of a pomegranate is the largest possible shear that you're going to have when it comes to considering a kli to have a hole in it, to be broken. And the size of a small root is essentially the largest, right? Rashi says that we don't really take into account these little punctures, kichones, right? Kichones mashke, kimotzi mashke, because that's not really being mevatel. That's, I guess, a little bit too specific. I don't know, for whatever reason, Rashi says that we do not. Right, Rashi says, kones mashke, umotzi mashke, leka limit eba in the inyan zraim. You're not gonna make a mistake, like in inyan zraim. You're not gonna think that those would be relevant for considering a pot to be connected to the ground. Really, the minimum shear for that is going to be the size of a small shoresh, small root. The other option would be the size of an olive, and the other option would be the size of a pomegranate. And the two opinions are the largest size, which is a pomegranate, and the smallest size, which is the size of a small root. And therefore you have echad amarbe ve'echad amamit. You borrow that phrase to kind of remember what the respective positions were in this machlaikas. Amr of Chinna bar Kahana Mishmei Rabbi Eliezer. So, okay. Klei cheres shiuro kimotzi zeisim. This is interesting. That when it comes to klei cheres, to earthenware vessels, at what point is an earthenware vessel considered broken? Right? You have an earthenware vessel, a dead sheretz fell inside the vessel, it becomes tamei now, it becomes a rishon l'tumah. So I believe it becomes a rishon l'tumah. I think it actually depends. I think if you're like dangling in the airspace, I think it might actually become an avatuma like it. Whatever it is, it's tamei. Alright, it's tamei. Great. Now it gets a hole in it the size of a olive. At that point it's no longer tamei, it's considered tahor. As Rashi points out, but what about the whole pomegranate thing? Didn't we say on Daf Pei Daled that when a kli, when it gets a hole the size of a pomegranate, is not considered anymore a kli. So that's by wooden kalim. This is kli cheres, however. So by kli cheres, once it already gets a hole the size of a olive, so at that point it's no longer considered a kli. Okay. Varehein, says the Gemara, kichlei. Wait, I skipped. Umarkshisha bre derabba mesayim ba mishmei Rabbi Eliezer, and the Markshisha in the name of Rabba concludes in the name of Rabbi Eliezer. Va'arein kichlei galalim uchlei avanim uchlei adama, and once a kli cheres, an earthenware vessel, gets a hole in it the size of an olive, it has the same status as vessels made out of dung, vessels made out of stone, and vessels made out of earth, but not earthenware. I think it's just earth that hasn't necessarily been put in a furnace and made into earthenware. She'ein mekablin tuma lo midivrei Torah v'lo midivrei sofim, which are not mekabel tuma, not midoraisa, not midorabanan. Zeu. So once a kli cheres gets a hole in it the size of an olive, it's no longer a kli. Ulinyan samid pasil ad she yifchas rubo. Regarding a kli cheres that is completely sealed on top with a good strong seal, and it's in a house with an oil mace, and we said that if a hole gets in the side of it, so then the tumah will not get into the kli from the side, only from the top. However, we said that if the hole is large enough, then the tumah will be able to get into the kli, and we see that that is ad shifchas rubo. The size of that is going to be a majority of the kli. If the hole is a size of the majority of the kli, at that point tumah will be able to enter. Hadran Allah Hamatzniya. We will come back to you in Yirtzeh Hashem. Perek Hamatzniya. Friends, I present to you the 11th parak of Shabbos. Hazorek Mirshus HaYachid L'Rshus HaRabim, Mirshus HaRabim L'Rshus HaYachid. Who could tell me what the result of this is? Somebody who throws something from Rshus HaYachid into Rshus HaRabim, or somebody who throws something from Rshus HaRabim into Rshus HaYachid. What do you guys think? 3 months into Masechta Shabbos, what do you think? Throw something from one domain to another. Chayev or pater? Very good. Chayev. Rshus HaYachid L'Rshus HaYachid. If you throw from one Rshus HaYachid to another Rshus HaYachid, okay, Rshus HaRabim be'emtza, and in the middle of these Rshus HaYachids is a Rshus HaRabim. Rabbi Akiva mechayev v'chachamim poter. Rabbi Akiva says that you are chayev, and the chacham say pater. So I'm kind of imagining that, like in like Italy and Spain and stuff. So you see those buildings with all these balconies, like all these windows and little balconies you can go out to, and you have on either side of the street, you have these buildings with these balconies. So imagine, each of one of those balconies is going to be Rshus HaYachid, and in between them is the street, so it's a Rshus HaRabim, okay? So imagine you chuck something from one of these balconies to another balcony on the other side of Rshus HaRabim, okay? So Rabbi Akiva says that you will be chayev. Chacham say you're going to be pater. Fine. So now the Mishnah actually explains to us what I just said, essentially. I was just copying the Mishnah. So, Ketzad. So how is this? So, shtei gzuz tiros zo keneged zo. So if you have two balconies, one opposite the other, Rshus HaRabim, kilu, and Rshus HaRabim is in the middle, hamoshit ve'azorek mizolazo pater. So if you would pass something from one balcony to the other, now obviously, if there's a large street in the middle, you're not going to really be able to pass something from one balcony to the other, but they would have to be close enough, okay? So if they were close enough that you'd be able to pass something from one, I guess if it's a small enough street, and it would still be considered Rshus HaRabim. Anyways, so if you can pass something from one balcony to the other balcony across Rshus HaRabim, or if you throw something from one balcony to the other balcony, pater. You are going to be pater according to the Chachamim. V'azorek pater. What did I just say? I said echad hamoshid. No, what did I just do? I skipped. Hayushtein b'diota achas. Okay, if you would have both of these balconies on the same level, meaning two balconies from the same building, let's say, right? So let's say, I live in my building and I have my little balcony, and the apartment immediately next door has its balcony. And now I want to throw something from my balcony to my next door neighbor's balcony, and it's more than 4 amas away. Okay? So we say, achas hamoshid, shtein b'diota achas. So now if you have these two balconies on the same level, i.e. next door neighbors in the same building, hamoshid chayev. So if you would pass something from one balcony to the next, so if you would pass something from your balcony to your neighbor, well then you'll be chayev. V'azorek pater. However, if you throw it to the balcony next door, so then you will be pater. Now, how come the distinctions over here? How do we decide what's chayev and what's pater? Well, of course, like everything else when it comes to Shabbos, we look at the source. What was the source in the Mishkan? What did they do in the Mishkan? Whatever they did in the Mishkan would not be allowed on Shabbos. So, so the work of the Levites, right? So, of course, as we learned the other day, there were the children of Levi, Gershon, Kahas, and Merari. And between those three families, they had different responsibilities for how they would pack up and transport the Mishkan. So the responsibility of Merari's family was that they would transport things like the beams, all like that heavy lifting kind of stuff. And Shtei agalos zo achar zo b'rshus harabim moshitin akrashim mizo lezo avalo zorkin. And the way that they would transport the beams of the Mishkan, so obviously they would dismantle the Mishkan, okay, but then they would have to transport all these beams from wherever they were encamped now to wherever they were going, okay? And the way that they would do it is they would have 4 wagons, right? You'd have one wagon next to another wagon, and then in front of those 2 wagons, you'd have another wagon next to the other wagon, okay? So you'd have basically 2 pairs of wagons, okay? And what they would do is, when they would be dismantling the Mishkan, so they would take the beams from the Mishkan, they would take the beams, put them into one of the wagons, and then from that first wagon, they would then transfer it to the wagon in front of it until the front wagon got filled up, and then they would fill up the back wagon, okay? So, you see, and the way that they would transfer these beams from the, first wagon, which was behind, to the second wagon, which was in front of it, they would pass it. They wouldn't throw it. As Rashi says, they were too heavy to throw. So we see that in the Mishkan, and each wagon was a Rishus HaYachid, right? It was 10 tfachim tall, and it was 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim wide. So therefore, we see that in the Mishkan, when they were loading up the wagons to transport the beams of the Mishkan, they would pass the beams from one wagon, which was a Rishus HaYachid, to the wagon that was in front of it, which was another Rishus HaYachid, and in between those 2 wagons was a Rishus HaRabim. So there you have it. However, they wouldn't throw it, and because they didn't throw it, so throwing it is not a problem. Therefore, back to our balconies case, if you have, if I want to transfer something from my balcony to my next door neighbor's balcony, so if I throw it to him, so Beseder, it's one Rishus HaYachid, throw it to another Rishus HaYachid, that's okay. But if I pass it to him, then that can be a problem, because they would do the same thing when loading up the beams to travel from the Mishkan. They would pass from one wagon to another wagon, from one Rishus HaYachid to another Rishus HaYachid. And if you're wondering what would be the difference between, let's say, how come only passing to my next door neighbor would be, comparable to what the Levium did, and not when I pass it across the street to my neighbor opposite me? So the answer is because in the Mishkan, with the setup of those wagons, so essentially they would be passing these beams from the wagon behind to the wagon in front, which is essentially similar, like if you think of the street and you think of the direction of the street, right? Meaning moving, let's say, forward. So the forward direction would be ki'ilu from my balcony to the balcony in front of me, right? As opposed to, like, they would not move the beams from, let's say, one wagon to the wagon to its left. They wouldn't do it. They would do that from one wagon to the wagon in front. They wouldn't do like to the wagon across on the left. So here also, ki'ilu, by the balconies, you wouldn't, so if you pass something from one balcony to the balcony opposite you, well, they didn't do that in the Mishkan, and therefore you would be potter. Okay? It's only when it's to the balcony sort of next to you, in front of you, if you think of sort of the direction of the street, so the balcony in front of you, sort of to your right, so that is essentially also how they would do it in the Mishkan. They would pass the beam from one wagon to the wagon in front, i.e. to, let's say, if you're looking at them, it would be to the right, not across. Does that make sense, friends? I hope. Says the Gemara, Michte, Zrika Tolada de Otzai. The Gemara has an aha moment. It says, wait a second. Okay, so we're talking about throwing things in Rosh Hashanah right now. Okay, what's the problem with throwing things? Well, it's a Tolada of Otzah. And the Gemara says, wait a second. Come to think of it, we've been talking about Hotzaa for the past 96 pages. What's actually the problem with Hotzaa? What's the big deal about Hotzaa? Hotzaa gufe heicha ksiva. By the way, where do we know in the Torah that Hotzaa is a problem? So Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Says Rabbi Yochanan the Amar Kra. Well, because the pasuk says in Sefer Shmos, in Parshas Vayakel, Vayitzav Moshe, that Moshe commanded, Vayaviru kol b'machane. That Moshe commanded, and he sent out word among the entire camp of Am Yisrael, and he says, people, don't bring any more donations for the Mishkan. We have what we need. Okay. So the Gemara says, Moshe Eichan Ava Yosef. Now, where was Moshe sitting? B'machne Levia. Moshe was in the camp of the Levites, right? Of course, there were three camps. There was the Machne Shechina, the camp of the Shechina. That is where the Mishkan was. Around that, the first camp was the Machne Leviah, surrounded by the Machne Yisrael. Okay, so Moshe Rabbeinu was in the Machne Leviah. Machne Leviah Rosh Hashanah Mavoy, and the camp of the Levites was a Rosh Hashanah. The Kamelu Yisrael, and he was saying to the Yidden, Lo safiku v'seisu me'Rosh Hashanah didchu Rosh Hashanah. Don't take things from your tents, from your house, which is a Rosh Hashanah, don't take them out and bring them to me over here in Rosh Hashanah in the Machne Leviah. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do hotzaa. So there you go. There's the source. That Moshe Rabbeinu informed the Bnei Yisrael, don't do hotzaa. Don't take things out and bring them to me. Don't take things from your Rosh Hashanah and bring them to me in Rosh Hashanah. But how do you know that it was Shabbos and Moshe was saying, don't do hotzaa on Shabbos? Dilma, b'chol kai. Maybe it was a weekday. Maybe it was a Wednesday. And what was Moshe saying? If you look at the context of that pasuk in Sefer Shmos, well, what was going on there? The people who were building the Mishkan came to Moshe and they said, Moshe, we have enough. We don't need any more. Just let the people know that they don't need to bring any more stuff. We have enough. So if we would just look at the context, we would see that there's no indication that it was Shabbos and Moshe was saying, don't do hotzah on Shabbos. I mean, practically speaking, what happened was the people building the Mishkan said, look, Moshe, we have enough. We don't need any more. Can you just tell people that they don't need to bring anything anymore? And that's what Moshe did. He said, all right, people, we have enough. We don't need you to bring any more. That's all he was saying, but there's no implication for hotzah on Shabbos. So the Gemara answers, well, we have a Gzeir Shaveh. Gomer ha'avara miyom kippurim. We have a Gzeir Shaveh of the word ha'avara that is written both by this case when Moshe says, Vayitzav Moshe vayaviru kol b'machne, to stop bringing stuff. And it also says ha'avara by Yom Kippurim. Ksiv hacha vayaviru kol b'machne. U'ksiv hasam, it says by Yom Kippur, v'avarta shofar trua. It says, v'ha'avarta, you will pass, the sound of the trua will pass. So, malahalim b'yom asr, avkan b'yom asr. Just like over there when it says ha'avar by Yom Kippur, it's on a day where there's an Isser Malacha. Well, guess what? When Moshe Rabbeinu said right? And he said, don't bring anything from your house to me. Don't bring anything from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim, who's also on a day. Just like Yom Kippur, this was also on a day that was Asur b'Melacha. It was Shabbos. And what Moshe was saying is, sure, there's the Pshuto Shel, right? Ein Mikra Yotzei Midei Pshuto, right? Obviously, there's a simple explanation, which was that they had enough. Moshe was telling them that there's no need to bring any more things. But at the same time, it was also Shabbos. And what Moshe was saying was, don't take things out of your house on Shabbos. Okay? Very good. So the Gemara says, very good. I understand now. Hotzaa is a malacha on Shabbos. What about achnasa? Hotzaa, of course, is bringing outside from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. What about achnasa? From Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid. How do I know that that's a problem? So svarahi. The Gemara says, well, it's logical. Michdei, me'rishus l'rishus hu. The thing is, we don't care Rishus HaYachid, Rishus HaRabim. That's a technicality. What we care about is one domain to a different domain. Mali apuke umali ayule. What's the difference if I'm taking out or if I'm bringing in? What's the difference if I take from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim, or if I take from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid? Who cares? Two different domains. You're doing an akira in one, anach in another, chayav. Miu, hotzaa av, achnasa tolada. But now our next question, one second. So, great. So, hotzaa is the father, and achnasa is the child. Umichdei, aha machayv, aha machayv. You're chayav for both of them equally. If I do hotzaa, I'm chayav v'chatas. If I do achnasa, I'm chayav v'chatas. I'm chayav on each of them equally. So amai karila hai ab, v'amai karila hai tolada. So what makes this one an av and this one a tolada? Like, what's the significance? Why don't we just call them melachas? They're both melachas. If I do either one, I'm chayav to bring a korban chatas. What makes this an av? What makes this a tolada? What's the significance of this one being an av and this one being a tolada? So nafkamine, the avid shtei avis b'adei adade, inami shtei tolados b'adei adade michayev tarte, v'y avid av v'tolada didei lo michayev elachada. You know what the nafkamina is? Let's read it again. The avid shtei avis b'adei adade, if you do two avis together, for example, you do hotzaa and you do zoreya. Okay? You take something out and then you plant it. Inami shtei tolados b'adei adade. Is zoreya an av or tolada? There was no zoreya and there was no teya. I don't know. So let's say you do hotzaa and let's just say zoreya is the av melacha. I think it is. I think that's what the Mishnah says. So you do hotzaa and you do zoreya. So you're going to be right. Or if you do two tolados. So let's say achnasa, we said is a tolada, and no teya, we're saying is we're hoping is a tolada. So michayev tarte. So you're going to be chayiv two korban chatases. Yet, if you would do, let's say, hotzaa and achnasa in one helem, so you wouldn't be chayiv twice, you'd be chayiv one, right? Meaning if you do two malachas from the same family, you would only be chayiv once. And that is the significance of avos and tolados. So sure, yeah, you're chayiv achatas for avos, you're chayiv achatas for tolados. The nafkamina is that while if, as we know, of course, from Rabbi Yochanan, right, that if you do all 39 melachas behelem achas, you're chayiv 39 korbanis. However, if you would do an av and all of its tolados behelem echad, you would not be chayiv multiple korbanis. You'd be chayiv one korban. That's the significance of avos and tolados. Is there a significance why, hotzaa has to be the av and achnasa has to be the tolada? Is there any significance within the family which one's the av and which is the tolada? I don't know, not that I'm aware of. I think that's more of a technicality, as we're going to see in a minute, right? Because the Gemara now asks, what about according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says that if you would do an av and a tolada, yutaka would be chayiv twice. So if you do hotzaa and achnasa behelem achas, yutaka be chayiv two korbanis. Well then, amai karula av, amai karula tolada. Well, in that case, what's the significance between hotzaa being an av and achnasa being a tolada? Just call them melachas. You're chayiv on both of them equally, even be'elam achas. You're going to be chayiv twice. So the Gemara answers, well, hach da'avoy b'mishkan chashiva kari la'av, hach de'lo avoy b'mishkan chashiva lo kari la'av. Technicality. Hotzaa was significant enough when it came to the Mishkan that it was identified specifically, right? right? Moshe said, don't bring things from your Rishus HaYachid to your Rishus HaRabim, don't do hotzaa. So therefore hotzaa becomes the Av Melacha. Hachnasa, which is just learnt out logically, well, what's the difference? Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim, or Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid. So that's not going to be an Av, that's going to be a Tolada. Seder. Inami, or else, Hachtichsiva Kri Av, Vaidilo Ksiva Kri Tolada. Or, you could just say also technically, whatever was written in the Torah, so we call it an Av. If it's not written in the Torah, we call it a Tolada. Hotzaa is written in the Torah, so that's the Av. Hachnasa is not written in the Torah, it's not logically, it's a Tolada. But, according to Rabbi Eliezer, practically speaking, there really is no difference. I mean, if you do both the Av and the Tolada, Be'elam Achas, you can be chayiv 2 korbanos anyways. And even according to the Tanakama, who says that you're only going to be chayiv 1 korban if you do an Av and a Tolada, there doesn't seem to be necessarily any significance of the Av versus the Tolada. They seem to be exactly the same, right? I guess you could rely on the other 2 answers of why is hotzaa necessarily the Av and Achnasa the Tolada. Because hotzaa was, significant enough in the building of the Mishkan, or it was listed in the Torah, whatever. But practically speaking, it wouldn't necessarily matter which one is the Av and which one is the Tolada. Let's go weiter, friends. Now we're going to have a Mishnah on Daf Kuf, another few days from now. Hazoyrek daled ames bekota lemala miyud tfachim kazorek ba'aver lemata miyud tfachim kazorek ba'aretz. Okay. If you throw an object, as Rashi points out, we're talking, something like a sticky fig, right? You throw a sticky fig 4 amos, and it smacks against the wall, and it gets stuck on the wall above 10 tfachim. Kizorek ba'avir. It's as if it's just thrown in the air. And it's just hanging in the air. L'matam yud tfachim, but if it gets stuck to the wall below 10 tfachim, well then kizorek ba'aretz, it's like you threw it 4 amos and it hit the ground. So why is that? The reason is because in order for something to be considered a domain, like a Rishus HaYachid, a Carmelis, right? Even a Makom P'tur, it would have to land on top of it. It would have to land on it. It would have to land on a platform. Here it's not landing on any platform. It's getting stuck against the face of the wall. So in that case, it's not any Rishus, and therefore we just look, there's a 10 Tfachim cutoff. If it's below 10 Tfachim, well, Rishus HaRabim is 10 Tfachim, right? And therefore, we consider it got stuck in Rishus HaRabim, and as if you threw it 4 amos and it hit the ground. However, if it's above 10 tfachim, well, Rishus HaRabim doesn't go above 10 tfachim, and it's just considered stuck in the air, right? Kizorek ba'avir, it's just considered stuck in the air, and you're going to be pater. Okay, fine. Zarak talad amos b'rishus. No, did I skip? Miyud tfachim kizorek ba'aretz ve'azorek ba'aretz talad amos chayev. And somebody who throws 4 amos and it lands on the ground in Rishus HaRabim, meaning you're in Rishus HaRabim, you throw something 4 amos in Rishus HaRabim, you're going to be chayiv. Zarak tal amos b'Rishus HaRabim minalan. And how do we know that when you throw something 4 amos in Rishus HaRabim that you're chayiv? Amar, I don't know if I said minalan, but minalan to mechayiv, so I don't know you're chayiv. Amar Reb Yosha, so Reb Yosha takes a stab at it. I guess, literally speaking, he takes a stab at it, because he's talking about like needles and things. Ha ha ha. Shekain orge yirius zorkin machtein zelazeh. Because the weavers of the panels for the covering of the Mishkan, right, the first layer of covering of the Mishkan was those woven panels. So those weavers, they would throw their needles to one another. Sounds pretty dangerous. Organ machtin lamalu. To which the Gemara says, why do weavers have needles? They have looms, they have warps, they have wefts. Why do they have needles? Rather, the embroiderers of the curtains, they would throw their needles to each other, right? And I think that this is probably talking about like the paroches and things like that, right? There were things that they would embroider different, I think like animals and things on them. So the embroiderers would have needles and they would throw them to each other. How do we know that they would throw their needles to each other 4 amos? Maybe they were just sitting next to each other and they would pass it to each other. So the Gemara answers, Matu adade b'machtin. Yeah, but the problem is that if they were sitting too close to each other, well then, when they have to extend their arm while they're sewing, they might poke the person next to them. And that would be unpleasant for everybody, probably. So Dilma besoch arba avu yasve. But the Gemara says, yeah, but still, even though they might not have been sitting mamish tzafuf, mamish right next to each other, because they'll poke each other, but they still might be within 4 amos. How do we know that they would throw something 4 amos? So, okay. So, that's done. Elo Amar Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda takes a stab at it. Shekin orge yiriyas zorkin buchyer biyiriya. Okay. So, the weavers of these panels, remember, you had the Mishkan. The Mishkan had a covering over it that was made, there were a few coverings. So the first covering was made by weaving, 5 different kinds of, so there were 6 strings in each thread, and there were 4 different kinds of threads, plus I don't remember if there was also a gold thread in the mix as well. I'm not sure that there was. But anyways, they would weave these covers, okay? Now that first cover was made up of 10 pieces. It had 10 parts in it, and actually there were 2 parts of 5 of these panels. Okay, and each panel was 28 amos long, and it was, I wonder, the Gemara actually might get into this, I don't know, whatever it is. There were 28 amos long, and there were 4 amos wide, and there were 10 of these panels, so that's a total of 40 amos of length, and they would spread that out over the Mishkan. Okay, the Mishkan was 30 amos long, and basically the thickness of the back wall was 1 amma, and so if you have this 40 amos long thing, meaning these 10 panels, each being 4 amos wide, so a total of 40 amos, and then you have this covering, and it covers the first 30 amos of the inside of the Mishkan, right? And then there's another amma for the thickness of the back wall. So now you have 9 amos left, and then of course we know from the other day that the height of the Mishkan was 10 amos, so it would then hang down 9 amos down at the back end of the Mishkan, and you would have exposed the adanim, the things that the krashim were put into, the braces, I guess maybe they're called, and that would be exposed, that bottom amma of the Aden, right? I hope I wasn't saying tfachim. Everything I meant to say was amos, right? The inside of the Mishkan is 30 amos long, and then that back wall is 1 amma thick, and then the excess material from the covering would hang down 9 amos down the back of the Mishkan, exposing the bottom Aden of 1 amma. Now, friends, where are we again? Right. So they would weave. So they would weave each of these urios. Now, each urea, right? So the covering was made up of 10 urios. Each urea was 4 amos wide. Okay. And what we're saying is, and remember our loom, right? So to weave these things, so you'd have the warp threads, right? They're going like straight. Then you'd have the weft thread that you're kind of throwing, right? You're zigzagging and throwing it across the warp threads in order to weave this material that is 4 amos wide. So you're basically throwing the weft, through the warp threads from one end of the urea to the other, i.e. you're throwing it 4 amos. And these looms were set up in Rishus HaRabim. So Rav Chisda wants to say this is the source for being chayav for throwing 4 amos in Rishus HaRabim. So Amar Rav Chisda sheken orge yiriyas, the weavers of these panels, zorkin buchyer biyuriya. They would throw this shuttle in the panel, right? The shuttle being kind of like the thing that the weft thread is wrapped around, and you would throw that across the panel, and that would be 4 amos. Valo ogdo biyado. But 1 second, when you throw this weft thing, the shuttle, so you're still holding on to the warp thread while you're doing it. No, not warp, the weft thread while you're doing it. So you're like holding on to the weft, and then you chuck it, I guess, to the other end of it while still holding on to the thread. And because you're still holding on to the thread, it's not a violation of Zorek, right? So if you would throw something that was attached to a string, apparently you would not be chayiv. So how can we say that this is the source of throwing? As long as he's still holding on to the string, he's not technically chayiv for throwing anyways. So the Gemara answers benischa basra. So it's talking about the last thread, meaning you ran out of thread of the weft. This was the last throw that you're going to get, at which point the shuttle then falls off of the string because there's no more string, and then it's no longer attached to the string. So you threw it. Great. The thing is that this shuttle is just landing in a makom p'tur, right? Because right, of course, in order for something to be considered a rishus, right, it would need to have 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, right? Now the thing is, the assumption is that the size of the loom from one end to the other, meaning obviously it was 4 amos wide, but its length was less than 4 tfachim. So you didn't actually have a platform, and therefore, since it was less than 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, it was a makom p'tur. And we know that if you throw something and it travels through a makom p'tur, so then you're going to be pater. So therefore, it's getting harder and harder to say that throwing this shuttle from one side of this panel to the other side of the panel would be where we learn out throwing something 4 amos, because you're basically throwing it through a makom p'tur, so it's not going to be a good proof. So ella shekin orge yirios zorkin buchyo l'shoalein. All right, so we'll try something else. Let's say you were one of the weavers and you forgot your shuttle that you used to throw the weft, that you use in throwing the weft threads. You forgot your shuttle at home. So you ask your friend, hey, do you have an extra shuttle? And he says, sure, and he chucks it to his friend. So he's going to throw that 4 amos. But maybe all the weavers were sitting very close to each other. They didn't have to throw it 4 amos in order to get it to his friend. So the Gemara says, well, matu adadi b'chefes. Yeah, but then when they get, when they have to be tightening the strings of the weft, after they kind of throw the weft thread through the loom, then they want to tighten it to make sure that it's taut. So then they're going to bump into each other when they do that. So v'dilma shalchufe avu mishalchufe. But maybe they actually were sitting very close to each other, but they positioned the looms in such a way that, they were like staggered, and they wouldn't actually bump into each other when they were fixing these edges. But then the Gemara says, one second, Vesu misha ili me'adadi, but in any event, are they even borrowing from each other, these shuttles? Ve'atani luda, ish mimlachto asher hema osim. Right? Each person from the work that he is doing, mimlachtohu oseh ve'eno oseh mimleches chavero. He would do his own work, he wouldn't do his friend's work, i.e. he'd come prepared. If he's a weaver, he'd come with his own shuttle, he's not borrowing his friend's shuttle. So, even if you were confused about this whole Rav Chizda thing, or you don't understand these looms and it's getting very technical, well, don't worry. None of, they weren't borrowing shuttles from each other, no. So, how do we learn out that you're not allowed to throw something 4 amos? Visu mavir dalid. And you know what? Even if we can come and answer how we know about throwing something 4 amos in Rosh Hashanah, well, guess what? How do I know that I'm not allowed to carry something 4 amos in Rosh Hashanah? How are you going to answer that? So you know what? So, Minolan Demchayiv, so Ella, Kol Dalad Amos B'Rosh Hashanah, Gemara Gemirela. You know how we know that you're not allowed to throw something 4 amos in Rosh Hashanah? It's the same way that we know that you're not allowed to carry something 4 amos in Rosh Hashanah. Halacha l'Moshe miSinai. It's halacha l'Moshe miSinai. It's a tradition that we have from Moshe at Mount Sinai that we don't, move things 4 amos in Rosh Hashanah on Shabbos, and that is that. That's how we know that we don't throw, we don't carry anything 4 amos in Rosh Hashanah. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Oh, so it says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel. Mokoshes ma'avir 4 amos b'Rosh Hashanah hava. The Mokoshes aitsim, right? There was a fellow in the Midbar, in the desert, who gathered wood on Shabbos, and as a consequence, we stoned him. So, according to Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, what was this problem what was the malacha that he did? So he was carrying 4 amos from Rosh Hashanah. That was the malacha that he did, and for that he was killed. Obviously with proper warning and acceptance of the warning and everything like that. B'masni satani, we learn in a brisa, Tole Shava. He was actually separating something from the ground. I guess he was chopping down the wood. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov Amar Me'amr Hava. Rav Bar Yaakov says, no, he wasn't actually chopping anything down. What he did was he gathered, right, there was a bunch of wood just lying on the floor, on the ground, already chopped down, and he gathered them. That's what he did wrong. The man afkamina, what's the difference? What's the difference? What's the difference if he gathered? What's the difference if he, chopped down? What's the difference if he carried? Who cares? I mean, whatever. Like, he did a malach on Shabbos, we killed him. So the nafkamina is for Rav. The Amar Rav, Matzasi Megillas Sisarim Be'Rab Chia. So we saw this actually on the Vav Mud Beis, that Rav was rummaging around in the attic of his uncle Reb Chia, and he found the Megillas Sisarim. Megillas Sisarim is that, until Rebbe wrote down Torah Sheba'al Peh in the Mishnayos, well, you weren't allowed to write down Torah Sheba'al Peh. You weren't allowed to write down halacha. It was all supposed to be oral. And therefore what they would do is, if for whatever reason they wanted to remember something, they would write it down, but then they would hide it, so nobody should see it. Okay? So, Rav found one of these hidden things that Reb Chia once wrote down, and look what it said. Chazuv Bein, it said, Isi ben Yehuda Omer, says Isi ben Yehuda, of his melachas arbaim chaser achas, that there are 39 of his melachas. Ve'enu chayiv el achas, but only chayiv once. Achas v'sulo, what does it mean you only chayiv once? We've spent a lot of time already analyzing the following statement of Rabbi Yochanan, Ve'atnan avos melachos arbaim chaser achas v'avinan ba'minyan al-amali, that we have our Mishnah that says that there are 39 melachos, and we say, how come we have to say that there are 39? I can just count them and know that there are 39. But Rabbi Yochanan shemasayin kulam be'elam achas, chayav kol achas v'achas. And Rabbi Yochanan says that the significance of saying that there are 39 melachos is so that if you do all 39 of them be'elam achas, you'll be chayav 39 korban chatas. That's the point. So, what does it mean that there are 39 melachos and you only chayav once? That's written in the Megillas Sisarim. So, Ema, Eino chayav al achas meim. So rather, you know what it means when it says in this Megillas Sisarim that there are 39 melachos and you only chayav once? No, what it means that there is one of the 39 melachos that you're actually not chayav misa for. But we don't know which one it is. So the question is, maybe you're not chayav misa for carrying something for Amos and Rosh Hashanah. So comes Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel to say, no, of course you're chayav misa for carrying for Amos and Rosh Hashanah. That's what the Mokoshes aitsim was chayav misa for, right? The Brisa who says that what he did was he did tolesh, so the author of the Brisa is going to say, no, certainly tolesh you're chayav misa for, because that's what the Mokoshes aitsim was chayav misa for, right? Rav Acha Bar Yaakov is going to say, no, certainly don't entertain the notion that me'amer you would not be chayav misa for, because that's after all what the Mokoshes aitsim was chayav misa for. So that's what the nafkamina is for these different opinions of what the Mokoshes aitsim did. Right? So Rav Yehuda pshitale da'amavir chayiv. So according to Rav Yehuda, it's obvious that you're going to be chayiv misa for havara dalat amos b'shusam, because after all, he says that that's what the Mokoshes was chayiv misa for. Umasnisa pshitale detolesh chayiv. And in the author of the Brisa, it's obvious to him that if you uproot something from the ground, you're going to be chayiv misa, right? Don't say that that's the one thing that you're not chayiv misa for, because after all, the Mokoshes aitsim was chayiv misa for tolesh. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov pshitale de ma'amer chayiv. Whereas according to Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, it's obvious to him that ma'amer, gathering wood, is going to be chayiv misa, because after all, the Mokoshes aitsim was chayiv misa for that. Marsavar ha mias lo masapka, marsavar ha mias lo masapka, meaning each one of these different opinions holds that, their melacha, that they argue that the Mokoshes aitsim was chayiv misa for, there's no doubt that melacha is not the one melacha that you would be pater for misa for. Okay, fine. That was Daf Tzadi Vav of Masechta Shabbos. Let's do a recap. So at the beginning we just talked a little bit more about the Tumah of Kalim. I'm not really going into too much detail over there. But then we moved on to a new parak of Hazorek. Okay, and then sort of the interesting stuff started, I think, really on Tzadi Vav Mud Beis, where we talked about what's the source for hotzaa. We said that comes from when Moshe proclaimed, Vayitzav Moshe vayaviru kol b'machne, and he said, nobody bring any more things for the Mishkan. And that was on Shabbos, as we learned from Gzeir Shavah from Yom Kippur, that it was a day that was also b'melacha. And what he's saying is that on Shabbos, you don't take something from your house to Rishus Harabim. You don't do hotzaa. What's the source for achnasa? Well, we say it's a svara, it's a logic. What's the difference between hotzaa and achnasa? The fact of the matter is, I'm bringing one thing from one rishus to another rishus, I'm chayav. What is the difference between an av and a tolada? So according to the Tanakama, the difference between an av and a tolada is that if you do an av and even multiple tolados, you're only going to be chayav one korban chatas, because it's the same family. Rabbi Eliezer, however, says that no, you'd be chayiv multiple korbanos chatas for an av and a tolada. So what's the difference between an av and a tolada? Well, simply speaking, an av is something that was significant in the building of the Mishkan. A tolada is something that's similar, but it wasn't necessarily important when they were building the Mishkan. Or else, a different option is that anything written in the Torah will be considered an av. If it's not written in the Torah, so it's not an av, it's a tolada. But you're still going to be chayiv equally for each of them. Then we got into this discussion of what's the source for being chayiv for throwing something for Amos in Rishus Ha-Rabim. So Rabbi Yoshia tried to say, well, because the embroiderers would throw their needles for Amos, but then we said that, it's hard to prove that the embroiderers were necessarily sitting more than 4 Amos away and that they had to throw the needles for Amos. We can't really prove that. Rav Chizda then tried to say, well, the weavers would basically, if they wanted to lend a shuttle to their friend, so they would throw it for Amos, but again, that was also, we couldn't really prove that. So then we ended up saying, well, actually, throwing something and carrying something for Amos and Rosh Hashanah is actually Allah Moshe Misinai. Then at the end, we talk about what exactly did this Mokoshes aitsim fellow in the Midbar, in the desert, what did he do that he was chayiv misa for? So Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, he carried something for Amos. In a Brisa, they say that he uprooted something from the ground. And Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says that he gathered things that were already on the ground. How could these Amoraim argue with the Brisa? I don't know. It's a good question. Friends, that was Daf Tzadi Vav. I hope everybody enjoyed. I hope you have a great day. Peace.